The Norfolk Naval Base cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime energy. Sailors from different units mixed together at long metal tables, their conversations creating a steady hum that echoed off the industrial walls. Steam rose from serving trays filled with meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans that had seen better days. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood in line with her meal tray, scanning the room for an empty seat. At 28, she carried herself with quiet confidence that came from years of proving herself in a male-dominated field. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her black hair pulled back in regulation style, and her posture spoke of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. She had just returned from a 6-month deployment in the Persian Gulf, where she had served as the intelligence officer aboard the USS Hampton, a Lowe's Angels-class submarine. The mission had been classified, involving surveillance operations that required split-second decision-making and nerves of steel. Sarah had performed flawlessly, earning commendations that would soon change her career trajectory in ways she couldn't yet imagine. 3 tables away, a group of Navy SEALs occupied their usual spot near the windows. They were easy to identify even in standard uniforms, something about their bearing, their watchful eyes, and the way they positioned themselves to observe all entrances marked them as special operations personnel. These men had just completed a grueling training exercise in the Virginia Beach area and were enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. Petty Officer First Class Mike Torres sat with his back to the wall, automatically cataloging everyone who entered or left the cafeteria. At 31, he was a veteran of multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, with enough combat experience to fill several careers. His teammates respected him for his tactical skills, but also knew him as someone who enjoyed testing newcomers with good-natured ribbing. "Check out the submarine officer," Torres said quietly to his tablemates, nodding toward Sarah as she searched for seating. "Bet she's never seen real action. These underwater types just push buttons and watch screens all day." His comment drew chuckles from the other SEALs at the table. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a 16-year veteran, shook his head with amusement. "Torres, you're gonna get yourself in trouble one of these days with that mouth." "What? I'm just saying. There's a difference between real combat and playing video games in a metal tube," Torres replied, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Sarah had heard similar comments throughout her career. Early on, they had stung and made her question whether she belonged in the Navy, but years of experience had taught her that actions spoke louder than words, and she had learned to let her record do the talking. She spotted an empty table and began walking toward it, her meal tray steady in her hands. Torres watched her approach and made a decision that would prove to be a significant miscalculation. As she passed within earshot, he called out in a voice designed to sound friendly, but with an edge that his teammates immediately recognized as trouble brewing. "Hey there, sailor, what's your rank? You look pretty young to be an officer." The cafeteria didn't go silent, but conversations at nearby tables quieted as people sensed something developing. Sarah paused, turning to face the SEAL table with a neutral expression that gave away nothing of her thoughts. "Lieutenant Commander," she replied simply, her voice clear and professional. Torres grinned, clearly pleased with himself. "Lieutenant Commander? Wow, that's pretty impressive for someone who probably hasn't seen much action. What do you do? Sit in air conditioning all day and watch sonar screens?" The other SEALs at his table exchanged glances. Rodriguez muttered under his breath, "Mike, just eat your food, man." But Torres was on a roll now, enjoying what he perceived as harmless fun. "I mean, no disrespect, ma'am, but there's a difference between real military work and, well, whatever it is submarine people do down there." Sarah set her tray down on the table she had been heading toward and turned to face Torres fully. Something in her posture changed, not aggressive, but absolutely solid, like a mountain that had decided to pay attention. "What's your name, Petty Officer?" she asked, reading his rank insignia with practiced ease. "Torres, ma'am, and you are?" "Lieutenant Commander Chen. And you're right about one thing, there is definitely a difference between what submarine people do and what other military personnel do." The surrounding tables had definitely noticed the conversation now. Sailors were turning in their seats, sensing that something significant was developing. Torres, still confident he was in control of the situation, leaned back in his chair. "See, I'm just saying it's probably pretty comfortable down there. Climate-controlled, regular meals, no real danger, must be nice." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. It can be comfortable, that's true. Of course, comfort is relative when you're operating in hostile waters, trying to avoid detection by enemy submarines and surface vessels while gathering intelligence that determines whether other sailors live or die. Tor's grin faltered slightly, but he pressed on. Intelligence gathering? Like what, listening to radio chatter? Sometimes, Sarah replied calmly. Other times it involves things like penetrating foreign naval bases undetected, photographing enemy ship movements, and staying submerged for weeks while foreign destroyers search for you with active sonar and depth charges. The SEAL table had gone quiet now. Chief Rodriguez was studying Sarah with new interest, beginning to sense that Torres might have bitten off more than he could chew. Sarah continued, her voice never rising but somehow carrying to every corner of the now silent immediate area. But you're absolutely right that submarine duty is different from surface operations. For instance, when things go wrong on a surface ship, you have options. You can call for help, abandon ship if necessary, or fight back against a visible enemy. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the next line with devastating calm. When things go wrong 300 feet underwater, surrounded by millions of tons of ocean pressure, you have two choices. Fix the problem or die quietly so you don't compromise the mission. Torres had stopped eating. In fact, most people within hearing range had stopped eating. Sarah wasn't done. The submarine service has the highest washout rate of any naval specialty, Petty Officer Torres. Do you know why? Torres shook his head, no longer grinning. Because it requires a very specific type of person to voluntarily seal themselves inside a metal tube and descend to depths where the ocean pressure could crush that tube like a beer can, all while maintaining perfect discipline and executing complex missions that most surface sailors never even hear about. The cafeteria had indeed gone silent now. Even conversations at distant tables had died away as word spread that something important was happening near the windows. Sarah picked up her meal tray again. But you're right about the air conditioning. It does work pretty well most of the time. When it doesn't, she shrugged. Well, you learn to work in 120-degree heat while maintaining nuclear reactor safety protocols and trying not to think about the fact that the nearest help is 2 weeks away. She started to turn away, then paused as if remembering something. Oh, and Petty Officer Torres, next time you want to question someone's experience or credentials, you might want to ask what they did to earn their rank before you assume they haven't seen action. Torres found his voice. What did you do? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to answer. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute truth. 6 months ago, I spent 43 days submerged in the Persian Gulf, gathering intelligence on Iranian naval movements. We were detected twice by enemy sonar and had to evade depth charge attacks while maintaining complete radio silence. The intelligence we gathered prevented what would have been a catastrophic surprise attack on a carrier battle group. She let that information settle over the silent cafeteria like snow on a battlefield. For that mission, I was awarded the Bronze Star with Combat V device. The V stands for Valor, in case you're not familiar with the decoration. Torres stared at her, his face cycling through emotions from embarrassment to respect to something approaching awe. The Bronze Star with Combat V was not a participation trophy. It was awarded for heroic achievement in combat situations. But you know what the best part of submarine duty is, Petty Officer Torres? Sarah asked, her voice returning to conversational tones even though the entire cafeteria was hanging on her words. What's that, ma'am? We learn to think before we speak. It's a survival skill when you're trapped underwater with the same people for months at a time. With that, she walked away, leaving Torres and his teammates in stunned silence. As she took her seat at the empty table, conversations gradually resumed throughout the cafeteria, but they were different now, quieter, more respectful, with frequent glances toward both Sarah and the SEAL table. Rodriguez leaned over to Torres. Well, that just happened. Torres pushed his food around his plate, his appetite gone. Did you know about the Bronze Star? Nope, Rodriguez replied, but I do now, and so does everyone else in here. At her table, Sarah ate her lunch methodically, her expression unchanged. She had learned long ago that respect in the military wasn't automatically granted with rank. It had to be earned, demonstrated, and sometimes defended. Today had been one of those days. The young ensign at the table next to hers leaned over. "Ma'am, that was the most awesome thing I've ever seen." Sarah looked up from her meatloaf. "What's your name, Ensign?" "Patterson, ma'am. I'm new to the base." "Well, Ensign Patterson, let me give you some advice. The best way to earn respect is through your actions, not your words. And never, ever underestimate someone based on their assignment or appearance. The military has a way of putting the most capable people in the most challenging positions." Patterson nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. Will you tell me about submarine duty sometime?" Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she had shown since entering the cafeteria. "Maybe. But first, you need to finish your lunch and get back to work. The Navy doesn't pay us to sit around talking." As she spoke, she was unaware that her encounter with Tors was about to set in motion a series of events that would change both their careers in unexpected ways. Word of the exchange was already spreading beyond the cafeteria, carried by sailors who recognized they had witnessed something significant. Within an hour, the story would reach the attention of senior officers who made decisions about assignments, training opportunities, and career advancement. The quiet confidence Sarah had displayed, combined with her documented combat record, would mark her as exactly the type of leader the Navy needed for its most challenging missions. And Tors, embarrassed but also genuinely impressed by what he had learned about submarine warfare, would find himself questioning his own assumptions about military service and beginning to understand that courage came in many forms, not all of them obvious from the outside. The story of Lieutenant Commander Chen's cafeteria encounter spread through Norfolk Naval Base like wildfire. By evening, it had reached the ears of Captain William Reeves, the base operations officer, who made a note to look into Chen's service record. What he found there would lead to a phone call that would change everything. 3 days after the cafeteria incident, Sarah sat in her small office reviewing intelligence reports when her phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Admiral Morrison's office. The Admiral would like to see you tomorrow morning at 800 hours. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Admirals didn't usually request meetings with lieutenant commanders unless something was seriously wrong. She spent the evening wondering if someone had filed a complaint about her public confrontation with the SEAL, despite the fact that she had remained professional throughout the exchange. The next morning, she stood outside Admiral Morrison's office in her dress uniform, every ribbon and decoration perfectly aligned. When called in, she found herself facing a distinguished man in his late 50s whose walls were covered with commendations from a career spanning 3 decades. "At ease, Lieutenant Commander," Admiral Morrison said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit down." Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, maintaining perfect posture despite her nervousness. "I understand you had an interesting lunch conversation a few days ago," the Admiral began, his expression unreadable. "Yes, sir. I hope I didn't overstep any boundaries." Morrison smiled. "On the contrary, you handled yourself exactly as an officer should, but that's not why you're here. Your record speaks for itself: Bronze Star, multiple commendations, exemplary performance evaluations. The Navy has plans for you, Commander." Sarah blinked. "Commander, sir." "Your promotion came through yesterday. Congratulations. But more importantly, I have a proposition for you. How would you feel about a change of assignment?" "What kind of assignment, sir?" Morrison leaned back in his chair. "We're forming a new Joint Special Operations Unit, highly classified, extremely challenging, and absolutely critical to national security. We need someone with your intelligence background and proven performance under pressure to serve as operations planning officer." Sarah's mind raced. Joint Special Operations meant working with SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Operations, the military's elite units. "What would my responsibilities include, sir?" "Planning and coordinating complex multi-service operations in hostile environments. You'd be working directly with special operations teams, providing intelligence analysis and operational support for missions that never make the news but keep this country safe." The Admiral stood and walked to his window, looking out at the harbor where submarines and surface ships shared the same waters that had launched Sarah's career. The position requires someone who can think clearly under pressure, someone who understands both the capabilities and limitations of different military units, and someone who has proven they can maintain operational security even when their life depends on it. Your submarine experience gives you a unique perspective that we desperately need. Sarah felt excitement building despite her nervousness. When would this assignment begin, sir? 2 weeks, but first, you'll need to complete an abbreviated Special Operations Familiarization course. You'll be working closely with SEALs, Rangers, and other Special Ops personnel, so you need to understand their capabilities and methods. Where would this training take place, sir? Morrison turned back to her with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Right here in Virginia Beach. And interestingly enough, one of your training coordinators will be Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez from the SEAL unit. I believe you're familiar with his team. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a mix of anticipation and concern. Working with the same SEAL unit she had encountered in the cafeteria could prove either very interesting or very awkward. I accept the assignment, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Outstanding. Report to Building 147 Monday morning at 600. And Commander, the work you'll be doing could very well save American lives. The intelligence planning for special operations missions is what determines whether our people come home safely. As Sarah left the Admiral's office, she felt the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. She also realized that her confrontation with Tors had probably played a role in bringing her to the Admiral's attention, not because she had embarrassed a SEAL, but because she had demonstrated the kind of calm professionalism under pressure that special operations required. Meanwhile, across the base, Tors was having his own difficult week. The story of his encounter with Sarah had reached his superiors, and while no formal disciplinary action had been taken, Chief Rodriguez had made it clear that Tors needed to reconsider his attitude toward other military personnel. You made yourself look like an amateur, Rodriguez told him during a private conversation in the team room. Worse, you made the team look bad. SEALs are supposed to be professionals who respect competence wherever they find it. Tors stared at the floor. I know, Chief, I screwed up. You did more than screw up. You revealed that you don't understand what this job is really about. Being a SEAL isn't about being tougher than everyone else. It's about being smart enough to recognize capability and humble enough to learn from it. Rodriguez picked up a file from his desk. Lieutenant Commander Chen, excuse me, Commander Chen has been promoted and assigned to work with Special Operations units. Guess who's going to be helping train her in Special Ops procedures? Tors looked up, his face a mixture of dread and curiosity. We are, and you're going to be her primary liaison for understanding SEAL capabilities and limitations. Think you can handle that without making a fool of yourself again? Yes, Chief, I'll do better. You'd better, because that woman has more combat experience than half our team, and she's about to become responsible for planning operations that could put our lives on the line. I suggest you figure out how to work with her professionally. The following Monday morning, Sarah arrived at Building 147 to find a classroom filled with personnel from various special operations units. Army Rangers sat next to Navy SEALs, while Air Force Special Operations personnel mixed with Marine Force recon operators. The diversity of experience and expertise in the room was impressive. At the front of the classroom stood Chief Rodriguez, who nodded professionally when he saw Sarah enter. Good morning, everyone. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to familiarize you with special operations procedures, capabilities, and limitations. Some of you are transferring between units. Others are taking on new roles that require this knowledge. His eyes found Sarah in the group. Commander Chen, you'll be working as an operations planning officer for Joint Special Operations missions. Your job will be to coordinate intelligence and operational planning between different units, so you need to understand what each unit can and cannot do. Over the following days, Sarah immersed herself in the complex world of special operations. She learned about the different capabilities of each unit, how SEALs operated in maritime environments, how Rangers conducted rapid assault missions, how Air Force Special Operations provided precision fire support and insertion capabilities. Tors, assigned as her SEAL liaison, found himself working closely with her to explain underwater demolition procedures, submarine insertion techniques, and maritime assault capabilities. Initially awkward, their professional relationship gradually evolved into mutual respect as Tors realized the depth of Sarah's tactical knowledge and her ability to quickly grasp complex operational concepts. The key to underwater approach is current analysis, Tours explained during a briefing on maritime operations. You have to calculate drift, timing, and extraction routes based on real-time conditions. Sarah nodded, taking detailed notes. What's the maximum depth for combat swimmer operations? Depends on equipment and mission duration. With closed-circuit rebreathers, we can operate at depths up to 60 feet for extended periods. But mission planning has to account for decompression requirements and emergency ascent procedures. How does that coordinate with submarine-based insertion? Tours paused, realizing she was asking questions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of operational complexity. The submarine has to maintain precise positioning while remaining undetected. The timing window is usually very narrow. That's where operational planning becomes critical, Sarah said. Intelligence preparation of the battlefield has to account for enemy patrol patterns, environmental conditions, and extraction contingencies all simultaneously. Rodriguez, observing the exchange from across the room, noted how Tours had stopped talking down to Sarah and started engaging with her as a professional equal. More importantly, he could see that Sarah's questions were making Tours think more deeply about his own operations. During the second week of training, the class participated in a complex planning exercise involving a theoretical hostage rescue mission. Sarah found herself working as part of a joint planning team that included Tours, 2 Army Rangers, and an Air Force Special Operations officer. The scenario involved American hostages held in a coastal facility with multiple possible approach routes and significant enemy defenses. Each service component had to contribute their unique capabilities to create a coordinated plan. Maritime approach gives us the best chance of avoiding detection, suggested one of the Rangers, studying satellite imagery of the target area. But extraction becomes problematic if the operation goes loud, countered the Air Force officer. We need helicopter support standing by, which means controlling nearby airspace. Sarah studied the intelligence reports, noting patterns in enemy patrol schedules and defensive positions. The coastal approach works if we can coordinate it with a simultaneous air operation that draws their attention inland. Tours looked at the timeline she was sketching. That's actually brilliant. They'll expect either an air assault or a maritime approach, but not both simultaneously with opposite objectives. The maritime team's real mission is insertion and extraction, Sarah continued. The air component creates noise and distraction while drawing their forces away from the coastal perimeter. Over the next several hours, the team developed a sophisticated operation plan that integrated each service's capabilities into a seamless whole. Sarah's intelligence background allowed her to identify weaknesses in enemy defensive patterns, while her submarine experience gave her insights into the challenges and possibilities of underwater approaches. When the teams presented their plans to the instructors, Sarah's group received the highest marks for tactical innovation and inter-service coordination. Outstanding work, Chief Rodriguez told the class. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need for real-world operations. Commander Chen, your intelligence preparation and operational coordination were particularly impressive. After class, Tours approached Sarah as they packed up their materials. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. Not just for the cafeteria thing, but for my whole attitude. I didn't understand what intelligence officers actually do. Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. What do you understand now? That planning is just as important as execution. Maybe more important. A perfect plan can succeed even if the execution isn't flawless, but perfect execution can't save a bad plan. That's exactly right. And the best plans come from understanding what each unit does well and what their limitations are. Your insights into SEAL capabilities made our plan possible. Tours nodded. Will you be planning our actual missions now? Some of them. The Navy is creating an integrated special operations planning center. I'll be working with teams like yours to develop mission plans for real-world operations. Good, Tours said. I'd rather have someone planning my missions who asks the right questions and understands what we're actually capable of. As they walked out of the building together, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that day in the cafeteria. A moment of confrontation had led to new opportunities, professional growth, and the beginning of what she sensed would be a very different kind of military career. She had no way of knowing that within 6 months, the The skills she was learning and the relationships she was building would be tested in ways that would push both her and Tors to their absolute limits. 6 months later, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the Joint Special Operations Planning Center, surrounded by multiple computer screens displaying satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and real-time communications feeds. The facility, housed in a nondescript building at Norfolk Naval Base, had become the nerve center for some of the military's most sensitive operations. The call came in at 3:47 hours on a Tuesday morning. Sarah had been pulling a night shift, monitoring intelligence feeds from the Middle East, when her secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a flash priority message. JSOPC, Commander Chen speaking. Commander, this is Colonel Martinez at CENTCOM. We have a developing situation that requires immediate joint response. Are you familiar with Operation Seahawk? Sarah's blood ran cold. Operation Seahawk was a contingency plan for rescuing American personnel from a specific compound in Somalia. The fact that someone was asking about it meant the situation had moved from theoretical to very real. Yes, sir, I'm familiar with the operational parameters. We have confirmed intelligence that 12 American aid workers and 2 State Department personnel are being held at the target location. Window for rescue is closing rapidly due to intel indicating they'll be moved within 48 hours. What assets do we have available, sir? SEAL Team 4 is on standby at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment has helicopters pre-positioned. We need a complete operational plan within 12 hours. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with high-stakes planning. Sir, I'll need to activate the full planning team immediately. Approved, this is Priority Alpha, whatever you need. Within an hour, the JSOPC was buzzing with activity. Tors, now promoted to Chief Petty Officer and serving as the primary SEAL liaison, arrived with his gear bag and a serious expression that Sarah had learned meant he was already thinking through tactical challenges. What do we have? He asked, setting down his coffee and studying the wall-mounted displays. 14 hostages, heavily defended compound, narrow extraction window, Sarah replied, pulling up satellite imagery. The good news is we've been planning for this scenario. The bad news is the actual situation is more complex than our exercises assumed. Army Ranger Captain Lisa Rodriguez, no relation to the SEAL chief, joined them, followed by Air Force Major Kevin Walsh from Special Operations. This was the same team that had worked together during training, now facing their first real-world crisis. The compound has been reinforced since our last intelligence update, Sarah continued, highlighting changes visible in recent satellite photos. Additional guard positions here and here, plus what appears to be a new communications array on the main building. Tors studied the imagery with a professional eye. That changes the approach angles. The original plan assumed we could use the eastern wall for insertion, but those new positions give them overlapping fields of fire. Which means we need to reconsider the entire tactical approach, Captain Rodriguez added. Rangers can create a distraction on the opposite side, but only if we can coordinate timing precisely. For the next 8 hours, the team worked with an intensity that surprised even Sarah. Every detail was examined, every contingency planned for, every timing sequence rehearsed mentally, and then refined. Sarah coordinated intelligence updates, integrated weather forecasts, and calculated extraction windows while the others focused on tactical execution. Enemy force strength is estimated at 40 to 60 combatants, Sarah briefed the team during their third planning session. They're armed with AK-47s, RPGs, and at least one heavy machine gun positioned on the main building's roof. What about civilian presence in the area? Major Walsh asked. Minimal, the compound is isolated, approximately 2 kilometers from the nearest village. Collateral damage risk is low, but we still need precise engagement rules. Tors had been studying the compound layout for hours. The hostages are being held in the western building here, but we have to assume they might be moved if the assault is detected too early. That's why the timing is critical, Sarah said. Rangers create distraction here at exactly H-hour-5 minutes. SEAL insertion occurs here during the distraction. Air support provides cover for extraction, but only after positive confirmation that hostages are secure. Captain Rodriguez nodded. My rangers can maintain the distraction for up to 20 minutes, but after that, we risk being overrun. 20 minutes should be enough, Torres said. Seal entry, hostage location confirmation, and movement to extraction point can be accomplished in 15 minutes if everything goes according to plan. And if it doesn't, Major Walsh asked. Sarah had been dreading that question. If the operation goes sideways, we have contingency plans for extended siege situation, emergency medical evacuation, and rapid reinforcement. But the longer we're on the ground, the higher the risk of casualties. At 1400 hours, they presented their plan to Admiral Morrison and Colonel Martinez via secure video conference. Sarah led the briefing, with each team member contributing their specialized expertise. The operation consists of 3 phases, Sarah began. Distraction and insertion, hostage location and extraction, and egress under air cover. Success depends on precise timing and seamless coordination between all elements. Admiral Morrison studied the plan carefully. Commander, what's your assessment of success probability? Sarah had been calculating odds throughout the planning process. Sir, if intelligence holds and weather conditions remain favorable, I assess an 85% probability of successful hostage extraction with minimal casualties. And if intelligence is wrong or conditions change, that drops to approximately 60%, with significantly higher risk to both hostages and assault personnel. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. The decision is made. Execute the operation. Godspeed to all of you. 18 hours later, Sarah sat in the operations center watching real-time feeds from helmet cameras, satellite surveillance, and aircraft sensors as the operation unfolded. She wore a headset that allowed her to monitor all communications channels simultaneously while coordinating with higher headquarters. Ghost Rider, this is Eagle's Nest, she spoke into her microphone using Tor's team call sign. Perimeter security shows normal activity. You are go for approach. Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider copies, beginning approach now. On her screens, Sarah could see infrared images of the SEAL team moving through the darkness toward their insertion point. Meanwhile, Ranger Team, Thunder, was positioning for their diversionary assault. Thunder, Eagle's Nest, initiate distraction in 60 seconds. Eagle's Nest, Thunder, Roger, 60 seconds to party time. Sarah watched the synchronized chaos unfold with professional detachment, but her heart raced as she realized that lives depended on every decision she had made during the planning process. If she had miscalculated guard rotations, misjudged structural weaknesses, or failed to account for some critical factor, people she cared about could die. Thunder, Eagle's Nest, execute, execute, execute. Explosions lit up her satellite feed as the Rangers began their assault on the compound's eastern perimeter. Immediately, the enemy forces began responding, just as the plan predicted. Ghost Rider, Eagle's Nest, enemy forces repositioning as expected. You have clear approach to western entry point. Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider, we see it, moving to entry now. Sarah held her breath as she watched Tor's team breach the western wall and disappear into the building where the hostages were believed to be held. For the next several minutes, she had no visual contact and could only listen to terse radio communications. Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider, multiple hostiles down searching for packages. Ghost Rider, Eagle's Nest, be advised Thunder is taking heavy fire, time limit accelerated. Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider, we found them. 14 packages, all alive, 2 injured but mobile. Relief flooded through Sarah, but she knew the operation was far from over. Getting the hostages out safely would be the most dangerous phase. Ghost Rider, Eagle's Nest, move to extraction point Alpha, Overwatch is standing by. Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider, moving now. We're going to need medical support for 2 packages. Sarah immediately coordinated with the medical team standing by at the extraction zone. Dust off, Eagle's Nest, prepare for 2 urgent casualties on arrival. Eagle's Nest, dust off copies, medical team is ready. The next 10 minutes felt like hours as Sarah coordinated the extraction under fire. The Rangers were running low on ammunition, the SEALs were moving 14 civilians through hostile territory in darkness, and enemy reinforcements were reportedly heading toward the compound. Overwatch, Eagle's Nest, Ghost Rider is 2 minutes from extraction point, Light up any threats along the route. Eagle's Nest Overwatch. We have eyes on, clearing the path now. Through her satellite feed, Sarah watched Air Force gunships eliminate enemy positions that threatened the extraction route. The precision of the air support was incredible, close enough to neutralize threats, but far enough from the SEAL team to avoid friendly fire incidents. Eagle's Nest Ghost Rider, at extraction point with all packages, ready for pickup. Ghost Rider Eagle's Nest, birds are inbound 30 seconds. Sarah watched the helicopters appear on her screens, landing just long enough for the SEALs and rescued hostages to board before lifting off into the night. Eagle's Nest all elements. Packages are secure, repeat, all packages are secure, RTB immediately. Thunder Eagle's Nest, disengage and move to secondary extraction point. Eagle's Nest Thunder copies, moving now. 20 minutes later, both teams were safely aboard aircraft heading back to their base. All 14 hostages had been rescued alive, with only minor injuries among the rescued personnel and no casualties among the assault teams. Sarah slumped back in her chair, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline began to wear off. Around her, the operations center erupted in quiet celebration, quiet because they were professionals, but celebration nonetheless because they had just pulled off a mission that would save 14 American lives. Her secure phone rang again. JSOPC Commander Chen. Commander, this is Admiral Morrison. Outstanding work. Preliminary reports indicate a completely successful operation with no friendly casualties. How did your planning hold up under real conditions? Sir, the intelligence was accurate and the plan executed almost exactly as designed. The coordination between services was flawless. I've already received calls from the Pentagon and the White House. This operation will be studied as an example of perfect joint special operations planning and execution. After the Admiral hung up, Sarah looked around the operations center at the people who had made the mission possible. Tours would be returning to base within hours, probably exhausted but professionally satisfied. The Rangers and Air Force personnel were equally tired but equally successful. She realized that the skills she had learned during her submarine tour, working under pressure with incomplete information while lives hung in the balance, had prepared her perfectly for this new role. More importantly, the confrontation in the cafeteria that had started this entire journey had taught her something crucial about earning respect through demonstrated competence rather than assumed authority. As she began writing the after-action report that would document every aspect of the operation, Sarah reflected on how far she had come since that day when a SEAL had questioned her qualifications. Tonight, that same SEAL had trusted her planning with his life and the lives of 14 innocent people. The trust had been earned, the mission accomplished, and the respect mutual. But Sarah suspected this was only the beginning of what would prove to be a very interesting and very challenging career in special operations. 3 weeks after the Somalia rescue operation, Commander Sarah Chen found herself in Washington, D.C., sitting in a Pentagon briefing room that she had only seen in movies. The walls were lined with photographs of previous operations and military leaders, creating an atmosphere of gravitas that matched the importance of the meeting. Admiral Morrison sat to her left, while across the table were officials from the CIA, State Department, and National Security Council. The operation in Somalia had garnered attention at the highest levels of government, and now Sarah was being asked to brief senior officials on the planning and execution that had made it successful. Commander Chen, began Deputy Secretary of Defense Patricia Williams, your operational plan achieved complete success with 0 friendly casualties and minimal collateral damage. The President specifically asked me to convey his appreciation for exceptional service. Thank you, ma'am. The success was due to outstanding execution by the special operations teams involved. We've read the after-action reports, said CIA Director Robert Hayes. What interests us is your planning methodology. You coordinated multiple service branches with different capabilities, timelines, and operational constraints. How did you make it work so seamlessly? Sarah had been expecting this question. Sir, the key was understanding that each service component had unique strengths and limitations. Instead of trying to force one approach to work for everyone, we designed a plan that used each unit's capabilities to compensate for other units' limitations. Give us a specific example, requested NSC advisor Jennifer Martinez. The SEALs needed an undetected approach to the hostage location, but they're vulnerable during movement across open ground. The Rangers provided distraction that drew enemy attention away from the SEAL approach route. The Air Force provided precision fire support that eliminated specific threats without endangering the hostages. Each element made the others more effective. Director Hayes leaned forward. "Commander, we're considering establishing a new position within the intelligence community. Someone who can coordinate complex interagency operations the way you coordinated this military mission. Would you be interested in discussing such an assignment?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Working in the intelligence community would be a significant career change, but also an opportunity to apply her skills on a much larger scale. "Sir, I would be honored to discuss any opportunity to serve." "Excellent, we'll be in touch through Admiral Morrison's office." After the meeting, Sarah walked through the Pentagon corridors with the Admiral, processing what had just occurred. "Sir, did that meeting just go the way I think it did?" Admiral Morrison smiled. "Sarah, that operation made people notice that the military has someone who can think strategically while maintaining tactical precision. The intelligence community needs people who understand both planning and execution." "What would that assignment involve?" "I can't discuss details here, but imagine coordinating operations that involve not just different military services, but different government agencies, foreign allies, and civilian contractors. The scale would be much larger, but the principles would be the same." 2 days later, back at Norfolk, Sarah was reviewing routine intelligence reports when Chief Torres knocked on her office door. "Ma'am, do you have a minute?" "Of course, Chief, come in." Torres sat down, looking unusually serious. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for the Somalia operation. The plan was perfect and the coordination saved our lives." "The execution saved lives, Chief. The plan was just preparation." "That's what I wanted to talk about. I've been thinking about that day in the cafeteria and everything that's happened since. I learned something important." Sarah waited for him to continue. "I learned that intelligence isn't just about gathering information. It's about understanding what information means and how to use it to keep people alive. What you do is just as dangerous as what we do. It's just a different kind of danger." "How so?" Torres thought for a moment before answering. "When we're in combat, we can see the enemy and fight back. When you're planning operations, if you make a mistake, people die and you might never know why. That kind of responsibility, I don't know how you carry it." Sarah considered his words carefully. "Chief, do you know what I learned from submarine duty?" "What's that, ma'am?" "That the most dangerous mistakes are the ones you don't know you're making. When you're underwater, surrounded by systems that can kill you if they malfunction, you learn to question everything and trust nothing until you've verified it yourself." "Is that how you approach operational planning?" "Every plan I create, I assume something will go wrong. I try to figure out what that might be and how we'll handle it. The Somalia operation went almost perfectly, but we had contingencies for medical emergencies, equipment failures, intelligence errors, and enemy reinforcement." Torres nodded slowly. "That's why you kept asking questions during training. You weren't just learning our capabilities, you were figuring out what could go wrong." "Exactly. And that's why I needed to understand what you and the Rangers and Air Force could really do, not just what the manuals said you could do." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone ringing. The voice on the other end was familiar but unexpected. "Commander Chen, this is Colonel Martinez from CENTCOM. We have another situation developing." Sarah grabbed a notepad. "What do you have, sir?" "American embassy staff in a Central African nation. Political situation is deteriorating rapidly, and we may need to evacuate personnel within 72 hours. "How many people, sir?" 43 embassy staff plus an unknown number of American civilians in the surrounding area. The airport is already compromised, so standard evacuation procedures won't work. Sarah felt the familiar surge of analytical thinking. What assets do we have available? That's being determined now. We need preliminary planning to begin immediately with the same team that handled Somalia. Understood, sir. We'll begin operational planning immediately. After hanging up, Sarah looked at Torres. Chief, how would you like to help plan another rescue operation? Ma'am, after Somalia, I'll follow your planning anywhere. Over the next several days, Sarah's team worked on one of the most complex evacuations they had ever attempted. The embassy was in a landlocked country with limited infrastructure, surrounded by hostile territory, and with no nearby military bases for support. "This isn't like Somalia," Captain Rodriguez observed during their second planning session. "We can't approach from the sea, we don't have air bases nearby, and we're looking at 40-plus people instead of 14. "Which means we need to think completely differently," Sarah replied, studying maps and satellite imagery. "Traditional special operations approaches won't work for this scenario." Major Walsh from Air Force Special Operations had been analyzing flight routes and refueling requirements. "Ma'am, the distances involved mean we'd need multiple aerial refueling operations just to reach the target area." Torres looked at the intelligence reports. "And the political situation means we can't count on cooperation from neighboring countries. We'd be operating completely independently." Sarah had been working on this problem for days, and gradually an unconventional solution was taking shape. "What if we approach this differently? Instead of trying to extract everyone at once, what if we establish a temporary safe zone and evacuate in phases?" "How would that work?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Sarah moved to the wall map and began outlining her concept. "Rangers secure and hold a defensible position here, about 20 kilometers from the embassy. SEALs conduct multiple extraction runs, bringing small groups from the embassy to the safe zone. Air Force maintains constant overwatch and provides transport for final evacuation." Torres studied the plan. "That could work, but it means we'd be on the ground for an extended period, days, not hours. Which increases risk, but also gives us flexibility. If something goes wrong with one extraction run, we still have options for the remaining personnel." Over the following week, they refined the concept into a detailed operational plan that accounted for weather, enemy activity, equipment requirements, and contingencies for every phase of the operation. When they presented the plan to senior officials, the response was immediate approval. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," Admiral Morrison told the team after the briefing. "You've solved a problem that traditional approaches couldn't handle." The operation, executed 2 weeks later, was even more successful than Somalia. All 43 embassy personnel were evacuated safely, along with 16 American civilians who had been trapped in the surrounding area. The extended timeline allowed for careful coordination and precise execution that minimized risks to both evacuation teams and evacuees. More importantly for Sarah's career, the operation demonstrated her ability to develop completely new approaches to complex problems. Traditional military planning relied on established procedures and proven methods. Sarah had shown she could create entirely new procedures when existing ones weren't adequate. A month after the embassy evacuation, Sarah received orders that would change her life again. She was being transferred to a joint intelligence position that would combine her operational planning experience with strategic intelligence analysis. The work would be classified at the highest levels and would involve coordination between military and civilian agencies. On her last day at Norfolk, Torres stopped by her office one final time. "Ma'am, I wanted you to know that working with you changed how I think about this job." "How's that, Chief?" "I used to think that being tough and skilled was enough. You taught me that being smart is just as important as being tough, maybe more important." Sarah smiled. "Chief, you were always smart. You just needed to learn to trust that intelligence is as valuable as physical capability." "Will you stay in touch? I'd like to know how your new assignment goes." "I'll try, but the work I'm moving into. Let's just say that successful operations are the ones you never hear about." Torres stood and extended his hand. "Ma'am, it's been an honor serving with you." As Sarah shook his hand, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A confrontation in a cafeteria had led to mutual respect, professional growth, and successful operations that had saved lives. More importantly, it had taught both of them that competence and courage came in many forms, and that the best military operations resulted from understanding and leveraging those different forms of excellence. Her new assignment would present challenges she couldn't yet imagine, but Sarah felt confident that the lessons learned from submarines, special operations, and working with people like Torres had prepared her for whatever came next. The military had taught her to adapt, to lead, and to earn respect through demonstrated competence. Those skills would serve her well in the shadowy world of intelligence operations, where success was measured not in recognition, but in threats neutralized and American lives protected. 2 years later, Commander Sarah Chen sat in a conference room in Langley, Virginia, reviewing intelligence reports that would never see the light of day. Her title was Senior Intelligence Analyst, but her real job was coordinating operations that involved multiple government agencies, foreign allies, and military units across different time zones and continents. The work was exactly what Admiral Morrison had predicted, larger in scale than military operations, but requiring the same principles of careful planning, precise coordination, and adaptive thinking that had made her successful in special operations planning. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming message from Norfolk Naval Base. The sender was Chief Petty Officer Torres, now serving as a senior instructor in the SEAL training program. "Ma'am, thought you'd want to know, just graduated another class of new SEALs. One of them asked about the submarine officer who used to plan our operations. Told him the story about the cafeteria. He said he wants to work with smart people who make good plans. Figured you'd appreciate that. Hope your new job is going well. Torres." Sarah smiled as she read the message. Torres had stayed in touch periodically over the past 2 years, updating her on changes in the SEAL community and occasionally asking for advice about training new operators. Their professional relationship had evolved into genuine mutual respect and friendship. She was drafting a reply when her supervisor, Deputy Director Catherine Wells, knocked on her office door. "Sarah, we have a situation developing that requires your expertise." "What kind of situation?" "Multi-agency operation involving a terrorist cell that's planning attacks in 3 different countries simultaneously. CIA has intelligence, FBI has domestic surveillance, military has assets positioned for response. We need someone who can coordinate all the moving pieces." Sarah set down her phone and focused completely on Wells. This was the kind of complex operation that her unique background had prepared her to handle. "What's the timeline?" "We estimate 72 hours before they execute whatever they're planning. Intelligence suggests coordinated attacks designed to maximize casualties and media impact." "What agencies are involved?" "CIA, FBI, NSA for intelligence, military special operations for direct action if required, plus coordination with British, French, and Israeli intelligence services." Sarah felt the familiar surge of analytical focus. "I'll need complete access to all intelligence streams and direct communication channels with operational commanders." "You'll have whatever you need. The President has been briefed and approved any resources necessary." Over the next 60 hours, Sarah found herself coordinating the most complex operation of her career. Intelligence agencies in 4 countries were tracking terrorist movements, military units were prepositioned for rapid response, and law enforcement agencies were preparing simultaneous arrests in multiple cities. The operations center looked like something from a movie, dozens of analysts monitoring computer screens, secure communications linking operations across 3 continents, and real-time intelligence updates flowing in from sources Sarah couldn't even identify. "Phoenix Base, this is Eagle's Nest," Sarah spoke into her headset, using call signs that had become second nature. "Target package Alpha is moving toward the London location, ETA approximately 6 hours. Eagle's Nest, Phoenix Base copies. British assets are in position and ready to execute on your command." Simultaneously, she was tracking terrorist movements in Paris and New York, coordinating with French intelligence and FBI surveillance teams. "Sword Point, Eagle's Nest. Target package Bravo has changed locations, redirecting surveillance to the new address now. Eagle's Nest, Sword Point. We have eyes on the new location, maintaining overwatch." The complexity was staggering. Sarah was coordinating operations involving hundreds of people across multiple time zones, each with different capabilities, different legal authorities, and different operational constraints. But the principles were the same ones she had learned in special operations: understand each participant's capabilities and limitations, create plans that use strengths to compensate for weaknesses, and maintain constant communication to adapt to changing conditions. 18 hours into the operation, intelligence indicated that the terrorists were accelerating their timeline. Whatever they were planning would happen within the next 12 hours, not the 36 hours originally estimated. All stations, Eagle's Nest. Operation timeline has accelerated. Execute Phase 2 immediately. Around the world, law enforcement and military units began moving simultaneously. In London, British special forces surrounded a warehouse where terrorists were assembling explosive devices. In Paris, French police were preparing to arrest suspected bomb makers. In New York, FBI agents were moving to intercept the final terrorist cell. Sarah watched it all unfold on multiple screens, coordinating the timing to ensure that arrests in one location didn't alert terrorists in other locations. Phoenix Base, Eagle's Nest. London package is secure. Repeat, London package is secure. Sword Point, Eagle's Nest. Paris operation complete. 5 suspects in custody, explosive materials secured. Liberty Bell, Eagle's Nest. New York arrests complete, all targets apprehended. Within 4 hours, terrorist cells in 3 countries had been neutralized simultaneously, preventing what intelligence analysts later determined would have been devastating coordinated attacks on civilian targets. As Sarah removed her headset and leaned back in her chair, Deputy Director Wells approached with a serious expression. Preliminary reports indicate complete success. 12 suspects arrested, significant amounts of explosive materials seized, and intelligence recovered that will help us identify other terrorist networks. How many potential casualties did we prevent? Conservative estimate, hundreds, possibly thousands if they had succeeded with their planned targets. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of relief and exhaustion that followed high-stakes operations. But this time, there was also something else, the realization that the skills she had developed over years of military service were making a difference at the highest levels of national security. Her phone buzzed with another message from Tors. "Ma'am, saw the news about terrorist arrests in 3 countries. Guessing you can't talk about it, but hoping you're doing well. By the way, that new SEAL I mentioned, he's being assigned to joint operations. Told him to look for the smart people who ask good questions." Tors. Sarah realized that Tors understood exactly what she was doing, even though she could never discuss the details. The principles they had learned together, the importance of careful planning, precise coordination, and mutual respect between different specialists, were being applied on a global scale. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to Deputy Director of Operations, making her one of the youngest people ever to hold such a senior position in the intelligence community. The promotion came with a new office, expanded responsibilities, and the satisfaction of knowing that her unique background in submarine operations and special operations planning had prepared her for challenges that few others could handle. On the day of her promotion, she received a package delivered to her office. Inside was a small plaque with the SEAL Trident insignia and an inscription, "To Commander Chen, from someone who learned that intelligence and courage come in many forms. Thank you for teaching us to ask better questions. The SEALs of Norfolk." Below the inscription was a list of signatures from Tors and dozens of other SEALs she had worked with over the years. At the bottom, in Tors' handwriting, was a final note. "That cafeteria conversation was the best mistake I ever made." Sarah placed the plaque on her desk where she could see it every day. It served as a reminder of an important lesson, that respect in the military, like respect anywhere else, had to be earned through demonstrated competence, professional excellence, and the courage to stand by your convictions even when challenged. More importantly, it reminded her that the best leaders were those who could recognize capability in others, regardless of their background, appearance, or assignment. The submarine officer who had been dismissed as inexperienced had become a senior intelligence official responsible for operations that protected American lives around the world. And the SEAL who had made assumptions about her capabilities had become a training instructor who taught new operators to value intelligence as much as physical courage, and to work effectively with specialists from other fields. The confrontation in the cafeteria had changed both their careers, but more importantly, it had taught them both that the military's greatest strength lay not in individual heroics, but in the ability to combine different capabilities into effective teams. As Sarah looked out the window of her new office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from submarine duty to special operations planning to international intelligence coordination. Each step had built on the previous one, creating a career path that no one could have planned, but that had prepared her perfectly for the challenges she now faced. The military had taught her that leadership wasn't about being the toughest or the loudest. It was about being the most competent, the most prepared, and the most willing to take responsibility for the consequences of your decisions. Those lessons had served her well in submarines, in special operations, and now in the shadow world where successful operations were measured not in recognition, but in threats neutralized and lives saved. And sometimes, late at night when she was coordinating operations across multiple time zones, she would remember a young SEAL who had questioned her experience and smile at the thought that they were both still serving, still learning, and still proving that competence and courage came in many forms. The cafeteria had gone silent that day not because she had embarrassed someone, but because she had demonstrated something important about respect, professionalism, and the value of judging people by their actions rather than their appearance. That lesson had shaped everything that followed, creating opportunities that neither she nor Tors could have imagined when they first met over lunch trays and assumptions. In the end, the best military stories weren't about individual heroics. They were about professionals who learned to work together, respect each other's capabilities, and create something greater than the sum of their individual talents. Sarah's career had become one of those stories, and she suspected it was far from over.